Hey everyone, this is Scott Goldman, Dr. Scott Goldman with the AIQ, and I am beyond excited to reconnect with one of my absolute favorite people to have spent time with, Brock Osweiler. For the select few who don't know who Brock is an incredible human being, a loving father, but what some other people might know about him is he had a good long tenure in the NFL as one of the better quarterbacks during his time there. Drafted in the second round, I believe, overall to the Denver Broncos, and then spent some time under Peyton Manning before getting his crack, working with a bunch of different teams, including the Texans, the Cleveland Browns, and then ultimately I got to watch him shine in Miami in more than a few games. But as good of a quarterback as he is, like I said, he's even a better person. And what I found is just the ability to have a conversation was always something that left me wanting, just 5 more minutes because of the way he thought and the way he saw the world and also saw the game of sport. So it's a real privilege to have you spend a little bit of time with me this morning.
Well, Doc, I definitely don't deserve that intro, but thank you, and it's a pleasure to be on with you today, and I'm looking forward to visiting.
Yeah, so I'm really grateful. I guess let's just start kind of talking football a little bit, with the draft right around the corner and everything. And you doing a bunch of work right now for ESPN and covering game days. I know that you've got your finger on the pulse. What kinds of trends are you looking at? What kinds of things are you observing going on at the college game or even at this phase where people are transitioning to the pro space?
Yeah, I think a big debate has always been, is the college game different than the pro game? And in so many ways it is, and I'd say they're slowly morphing into each other. There was a time, you look back when Peyton Manning in the early 2000s started playing in a no huddle system at the line of scrimmage, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, what is going on?" This is cutting edge. This is innovative. It puts pressure on a defense. Where kind of fast forward, and colleges started to grab onto systems like that offensively. And you saw everybody playing at the line of scrimmage and nobody was huddling. So then the big question came, when you talk about college to NFL, how are guys going to translate? And this is probably more specifically at my position, the quarterback position. How are they going to translate from college to the NFL game when in college, you're playing in this no huddle system. You're never getting together. You just look to the sideline. Plays are signaled in. And then all of a sudden you get to the NFL. You have to get into a huddle. You have to be able to hear a 14, 15, 16 word play come into your helmet. Then you need to regurgitate it to your teammates and go execute the play call. So for the longest time, the game was kind of two different things. But now I think, watching NFL football the last couple of years, you see more teams playing at the line of scrimmage. They're condensing play calls. And obviously, this is all just offensively speaking. Defensively, the game is always evolving and morphing as well. But when you talk about this time of year and the combine and pro days and scouting and the NFL draft coming up, the big question is always, how are guys going to translate from college football to the NFL?
It's a great point. And so it kind of runs me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Again, when I reflect on some of our conversations, I always valued your intellect. Like the way you saw the game, the way you saw the situation. I mean, it kind of leads me to wonder, okay, so if we were to tap your wisdom, what would you be looking for in a quarterback?
Well, there's a couple characteristics that come to mind when you bring this up, and I think first and foremost is just leadership. Are you a natural leader? Because at the end of the day, when you're a quarterback in the NFL, not only is the entire locker room looking at you on a daily basis and looking to follow you, it's the entire organization,
Mm.
right? It's the coaches, it's the front office, it's ownership. Everything is on your shoulders. So, what kind of leader are you? How do you go about your leadership tactics? I think toughness is a big factor. The season is growing. There's now an added week. You keep hearing the commissioner and the league talking about adding even more regular season games. So, are you going to be available to your team? So leadership, toughness, something that you would probably agree with. How do you process? If you're going to play quarterback at the next level and be successful, you have to be able to take in a lot of information and be able to crunch it down to what truly matters and process it very quickly. When you think about the play clock and that thing's running, there's a lot of checks that need to happen before the football snapped. And so how do you process the game? When you get to the line of scrimmage and defenses start moving, that's going to change how the routes are ran. That's going to change maybe how the offensive line and the running back are going to work in pass protection. So are you able to process that quick enough to relay it to your teammates and then just do it in real time? So leadership, toughness, processing. Obviously, there's the physical tools. Arm strength, size, durability, things like that. And then there's the intangibles, the things that, and that's where really that leadership falls into place. The intangibles are always the question mark. And that's the thing that scouts are always trying to figure out. That's why Tom Brady slid to the 6th round. That's why certain guys fall in the draft, because maybe they don't have the physical tools, or I should say the first round physical tools, but their intangibles are what make them, a great player. When it comes to quarterback play, and this is where I would kind of finish it, decision making, timing, and accuracy. Those are the 3 things I've always really felt that if you do those 3 things at a high level, you're going to have a lot of success for a long time. Decision making. You're the only person on offense that touches the football every single play except for the center. So you're going to have to make decisions every single play. Very rarely do you just get a run play where you don't have to potentially motion a receiver in to block a safety or move a tight end into a better position to maybe block the linebacker or flip the direction that the run's going. So very rarely do you just get to snap the football and hand it off to the running back. So decision making is at a high premium. Accuracy in the NFL, the throwing windows are small. There's a saying, receivers and tight ends are rarely open in the NFL. You usually have to throw them open. So accuracy is paramount. And then your timing. The shot clock, it's quick in the NFL. You have about 2.5 seconds to get that football out of your hand before these great pass rushers are getting to you. So, just kind of being put on the spot. Those are some of the things that jump out in my brain that I would look for in a quarterback.
And look, I know you're a man of humility, but if it's all right with you and we could just sort of have you step out of your comfort zone and just talk about what would you say were some of your strengths?
Yeah. Some of my strengths as a quarterback, I think I obviously had a lot of the physical tools. Bigger stature guy, kind of that prototypical quarterback that the NFL was looking for a long time. At 6'6", 240 pounds, can make all the throws. Processing was never an issue for me. If anything, at times I overthought it, and looking back on my career, that would probably be something that I would have done different. At times I think I tried to be perfect. And as you know, and so many people know, there is no such thing as perfect. We strive for it, but perfect doesn't exist in this world. So, I think my processing was there, the physical tools were there, the leadership, the toughness, the work ethic. It comes back to not trying to be perfect. And honestly, that falls into, in my opinion, that decision-making category. I look back and, you need so many reps at that next level, and until the game truly slows. And I think everything just kind of, the picture clears, if you will. And I had a very unique situation. I only started 1 year of college football. So when I came into the NFL, I didn't really have a ton of experience even at the college level. And then when I get to the NFL, I believe I started 25 games, if I remember right. And I'll say this, Doc, right about that 25th game is when everything really slowed down and really started to make sense. And I truly stepped foot on the field with absolute confidence. But within those 25 games, you could easily look back and find a dozen examples, if not more, of poor decision making. And a lot of that stems from having to learn the game and having to go out there and try something to find out if that is a good decision or if it's not at that level. And so, you asked about the great things or maybe the things I did well, and I mentioned that. But, as you mentioned that, it's how the brain works, and especially as a quarterback, right? And that's the humility portion. I think there was some decision making early on that wasn't great, that I would have loved more time to correct and really kind of write that story. But yeah, there's a few things for you.
And look, just to pull on that thread, I find it's interesting, right? Like, I think the research shows right now something like 51% of first round draft pick quarterbacks fail.
Wow.
And I always think it's interesting that they talk about the quarterback as the fail, when I'm going, no. I don't think it's the individual that fails. I actually think it's the pairing, right? So, like, for those that maybe aren't around football as much as you and I are, it's players, plays, schemes, and systems. So I don't think it's that the individual player that fails. Rather, it's the goodness of fit, right? So
Yes.
sometimes it's about, and so when I think about even your own story, and I'm going, gosh, it's really interesting to me because with 1 year of film for the scouts to study, there was a lot of unknown of, well, what can this person do? And then it was figuring it out in live time with all these external pressures of everything else that you talked about, like when you enter a room and how the room changes, right? So I think the secret sauce to success in the NFL is when you really understand the player. And when you really understand the player, you can put them in a system that perfectly matches their strengths and their abilities and everything else.
You are absolutely spot on. So when you say 51% of first round quarterbacks fail, and I'm sure there's a different definition for what failing means, put it this way: if you're drafted in the first round, you have the physical tools. You have the majority, if not all, of the mental tools. You have everything it takes to be a successful quarterback for a decade plus. So I put it on the organization. Everything that you just said. And it starts at the top with the general manager. What pieces is he putting around you? Then it comes to the head coach. What culture is the head coach creating? Is he creating a culture that cultivates you coming in, learning the professional game, growing and developing at an appropriate rate, right? And then it comes down to the coordinator. Is the coordinator setting you up for success? Is he calling the proper plays to allow you to go out there and use the physical tools that you have, and so on and so forth? Everything that you just said. And I'm a living example of it, and I'll use a perfect example. And once again, until you try, you don't know. So the first real starting playing time I had in the regular season came in 2015. Gary Kubiak was the head coach in Denver, but he was also our play caller. And he ran a traditional West Coast system. And it was the first year that I'd ever had experience with that. The 3 prior years in the NFL for me, it was Peyton Manning's system. It's without going into depth, it's polar opposite of the West Coast system. There's a lot more on the plate of the quarterback, especially at the line of scrimmage when it comes to pass protection. hot routes versus pressures, and all sorts of things. There's a lot of moving parts where the West Coast system is designed to, as long as you understand the footwork of it and the timing of how it's supposed to work, it takes a ton of pressure off the quarterback at the line of scrimmage and allows him to just go use his physical tools and abilities and play football. So long story short, I had a pretty successful first 7 career starts under Gary Kubiak. And the system obviously fit my brain and skill set. You know, I'm trying to think who he had prior to me. When he was the head coach in Houston, there was a quarterback named Matt Schaub. Very similar physical tools as myself, very similar body types. And Matt Schaub went on to have Pro Bowl seasons and a great career under Gary. Okay, well, to fast forward, to tighten up this conversation, I leave Denver after that season and go play in Houston for Bill O'Brien. And Bill brought the Tom Brady, Josh McDaniels system with him from New England. Well, maybe in time that system could have fit me better, but the first year of it, I mean, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. There is so much that falls on the quarterback's plate, just even on run plays, right? There's no breather plays, as us quarterbacks call it, when you get to just break the huddle, go up, snap the football, and hand it off, or go through a basic progression. It was like every time we broke the huddle, you know, you're going through trigonometry at the line of scrimmage just to get the ball snapped and execute the play. Long story short, I made a lot of bad decisions that year. You can look back on 2016 and easily find them. Now, we still won the division. We ended up winning a playoff game. We had a great defense and other pieces. But the point being to where you're going with this, I don't think that was probably the ideal system for me, where the West Coast system that you see Kyle Shanahan running in San Francisco, the Miami Dolphins run pieces of it. It's all across the league. You can find it everywhere. That really fit me. And so to your point, all right, if you're going to take a guy in the first round, well, let's make sure we're putting him within a system and an organization that allows him to go have success while being himself.
Yeah, and so I think that brings us to the AIQ, right? The measure that my partner Jim and I created, and we were lucky enough to use it a little bit with you. And one of the things that we've done this year that I'm really excited about, and I can't wait to share with the league, is we created an AI bot. So we call it the AIQ Plus. And it was interesting because the software engineers that designed the AI bot for us, AIQ Plus, they said, you know, treat it kind of like an intern. So we gave it 297 articles on sports-specific intelligence. Then I asked a couple of coaches that I've worked with, some that you might know, and they gave me their playbooks. So we fed it 297 pieces of information about intelligence and how intelligence impacts sport. Then we gave it some NFL playbooks. Then we gave it our AIQ database. Honestly, it was like Neo from the Matrix getting downloaded. All of a sudden, it was like, I know Kung Fu. So I was playing with it, and I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, okay. And I think this would be kind of neat. I asked it just to tell me about you.
Oh, I love it.
And one of the things is, so what's kind of cool is it spit out, here are all these strengths that you have. What's really interesting is it didn't identify any weaknesses, which is really rare. Most people have some strengths, weaknesses. But to your point, it talks about how you have really good decision making and adaptability. Like you can understand defensive formations and kind of anticipate that flow. That you've got this great ability with throwing lanes and passing windows. That you can also, and it's funny how you talked about the West Coast offense, right? Quick reaction time to really respond and throw quickly. You know, again, keeping peripheral vision to help prevent yourself from taking an unnecessary sack. But it's fun, right? Because we can go one step further. For example, you were talking about like what kind of scheme. So let's ask, what would be the best offensive scheme for Brock.
This is amazing, by the way. This is incredible.
Thank you. So let's see what it says. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer if I'm on a video call, but we can just sort of sit here, and this is the part that we can always edit out. But
So what film was uploaded into this bot?
like, what game? Like, you mean?
Was it
So
just generic? Was it generic games? Was it specific games?
it was NFL playbooks, right? So it was all about learning and understanding the way a like an offensive coordinator would call a play.
That's
So we
incredible.
were just trying to teach it the game of football because it didn't know. The other thing that I think is kind of nice is to we do not allow it to activate or go across the internet because we felt like that might dilute its efficacy in being able to interpret. So predominantly, it's drawing its conclusions from the AIQ and your AIQ performance. So it's talking about like, here are some strong, make them well suited for an offensive scheme that leverages these types of strengths. And look what came up. The number one thing that it suggests is the West Coast offense. So
It's
how funny is
incredible.
it, right? But could you imagine if a team was
Wow.
debating about whether to draft you and they asked this question and then all of a sudden it was like, boom, he's best for the West Coast. And then the GM goes, well, we don't run that here. So maybe if we really love Brock, what we do is we now bring in an offense coordinator and a play caller who really values the West Coast. I mean, you mentioned it with Miami, right? Like they draft Tua. I think it was a bad system fit with Coach Flores and what he was doing, bringing that New England system. They bring in Mike McDaniel, who puts in this kind of West Coast
Yep.
up-tempo system, and all of a sudden you see Tua really flourishing. So it's really about if you know the player, then you can know what plays. And I just go back to maybe there's an alternate universe or world where we could have given the team, the Broncos, for example, we could have given this to them on day one for when you first started with them. Or, when you get traded to Houston, we could have given this to them on day one. And then they would have said, you know what? Like, we need to switch for Brock, or we need to reevaluate if bringing
Right.
Brock in is the right fit for us.
Yeah, because Doc, I tell you what, the West Coast system versus everything that is out there as well, the digits and like I said, Peyton and Tom and what they did, they are polar opposites. They are so different. The responsibilities of the quarterback, the timing, the way the plays, the routes, the way hot routes work. So it is different. So I think you're spot on, and you're right. Like in the pre-draft process, if a team falls in love with a quarterback because of who he is as a person and, hey, this has to be our guy, but the AI bot spits this out, you're right. You then make a decision and you somehow get your brain away from that quarterback because he doesn't fit what we do, or now it's time to bring in a different offensive coordinator because, I'll say this, and you know this, in life, so much of having long-term and great success stems from a little bit of luck, right? And I think we can all agree from that. Well, to me, I put the luck factor in the NFL for quarterbacks is, well, who's your offensive coordinator? What culture do you go to? What's your system? Because so many guys drafted in the first, second, third, I'd even say you could potentially talk fourth round, but for sure those first 3 rounds, you're talented. You bring a lot of really good things to the table. The question is your career going to be 4 years or 14 years? And a lot of that has to do with the luck of where you end up going in the draft and what system ultimately you get to play in.
Totally agree. Well, and then let's also talk about like the players that are around you too. So, like, we could do this. Which wide receivers from this year's draft, right? From this year's draft class, complement Brock's strengths. And like, I haven't done this before. I'm just kind of curious
I'm
because
so curious. I
yeah.
hope it says Tetaroa McMillan.
But so look, it's kind of identified a handful of dudes And some of these guys might even be like hidden gems, you know,
Wow.
and stuff like that. So you're going like, oh, so here's some people that kind of so. And it's funny because one of the things it looks like it's drawing to is you've got this great decision making and adaptability thing, and that's what guys like Will Shepard and Isaac
Wow.
and some of these other folks, they also seem to have really strong areas that kind of match up. So, like when you talk about a quarterback and a wide receiver being on the same page, you can do that. But then let's go back to like the Houston thing, right? So they love your physical ability, they love the game film that they see in Denver, but they're not quite fitting you to the right scheme. So now there's a little bit of panic, right? So what if we were to say, when developing Brock,
Mm.
what areas should we focus on and how do we address them?
This is amazing.
I'd be curious to see. I mean, given that you have no weaknesses, I'd be curious to see how he responds because I say he like it's. I mean, it's funny like treat it like an intern, right? But so the AIQ plus, it just does some of these fun things, and we'll see. Like I'll be curious. Yeah, go
Did
ahead.
you run this on some of the quarterbacks at the combine this year?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the other things that we can do is we can have it do comparables where it's like, you know, tell me, like, I asked it to compare, you know, give me 10 running backs that compare to Saquon Barkley. And it
Wow.
was amazing. It spit out, you know, a bunch of players, some of who are in this draft. So it'll be interesting to see. But, all right, so here it's saying we should play to your strengths, which really has a lot to do with that navigation and spatial awareness. So designing plays that require quick identification of throwing lanes and optimal scrambling paths. That sounds like the West Coast offense to me.
Yep. Yep.
Then you got incorporate some advanced film study. Okay, no brainer. Emphasize some situational drills, and I think that makes a lot of sense too. And then leverage your ability to improvise. That's visual spatial processing is all about your ability to improvise and create and extend plays. So, like, you know, when you think about like a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, who I know, you know, you have some familiarity with, like, one of his gifts was he could always extend that play, right? If a play broke down. And so what's like what I find to be fascinating, and you had such a beautiful gift of this, some players are extending the play because they don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
other players are extending the play to put the defense in a tilted position that exposes them. And I always thought you were very strategic in how you were extending a play. It wasn't that you were confused, but rather you were creating a level of chaos because you could improvise better in the chaos than the defense could adapt to your improvisational abilities.
Doc, think about what I said earlier in this call when I said when I look back at my career, I felt like at times I was trying to be perfect. And
Yeah.
that really actually prohibited me from having success, whether it was on that play or that game or that quarter, whatever it was. It's amazing how like the thing about making quick identifications, making quick decisions, getting the ball in my hand, I think about the times that I had the most success as a quarterback. It was in college. The one year I was a starter, broke a bunch of records, had a ton of success. It was kind of your RPO meets West Coast system. Get the ball out of your hand, quick decisions. Like my offensive coordinator used to say, you're a point guard. How fast can you get that ball to your playmakers? And then I think about 2015 in Denver with Gary. Well, those were the only two times I played in systems like that. Everything else was, all right, let's huddle up, let's break the huddle. All right, when you get to the line of scrimmage, you got to go through, 5 checks. All right, is this done? Is this done? And then you get to go play football. That's not how my brain works. I want to get up to the line of scrimmage, put pressure on the defense, and see it quickly and make quick decisions and get the ball out. This is amazing what you've developed. This is incredible.
Thank you. I mean, thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you.
Well, because it'd be so helpful for coaches. Hey, why
Yeah.
is Brock struggling? I specifically remember my rookie year, and I won't say which coach it was, but there was a coach on our offensive staff that came up to me in practice and said, how about you show me why we drafted you in the second round today? Because I wasn't practicing well. Well, if you think back to the system we were running, it was this mix of this Josh McDaniel system from New England meets Peyton Manning's system. That's not what I was meant to play in.
Yeah. And that's what the AIQ Plus just illustrated was like, man, if I think really good coaches figure it out eventually, really great coaches figure it out faster. And if
Yeah.
you had this information, like if you had the AIQ Plus and you could ask it that kind of question and it gave you that kind of information, I mean, I just think of all the different careers that we can currently impact and save a lot of time and frustration and pain and heartache, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this thing does a lot of good. I'm super excited to see the teams that are using it right now, and hopefully they're going to be making some really well-informed decisions. So,
This is amazing. Well, it's certainly going to help them. And boy, if I was a front office decision maker, a coach, I'm certainly using this as a tool.
from your lips to everyone's ears. Listen, I can't thank you enough again. I mean, it brings me right back to the days when we were together in Miami, where it's like, I just wish I had 5 more minutes. I mean, if I can just end on this note, to anyone who's watching and listening this, to really understand how special Brock is, it's the way he makes you feel. It's the way that when he walks into a room, people just want to sit down next to him and they just want to spend time with him. And it's such a combination of things. It's your intellect, it's your authenticity, it's your ability to care and express a genuine interest in others. Like, it really is. I mean, it's fun to be back in a moment like this with you where I'm going, gosh, I just wish I had 5 more minutes. So I'm glad that you gave me a chance to illustrate the AIQ Plus. When I was thinking about who would be a great person to talk to about the AIQ Plus, you were the first and only name that came to me. So thank you for the conversation. This has been a real treat.
Well, thank you, Doc. And, I really appreciate your comments. I always cherished our conversations. There's so many tools, is what I call them, that you have given me in conversations going all the way back to 2018 that I still use almost every day in my life today. So thank you, and this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me.